Tenderhearted, the podcast for those of us who struggle with being extra sensitive in a less than sensitive world. This is your host, Amy Kelso. I'm a writer, speaker, teacher, and advocate for anyone who is tenderhearted or cares about someone who is. Hello and welcome to Tenderhearted. I am your host, Amy Kelso, and today I want to talk about the historical figure of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, just some background and some preface before we get into this. First of all, I was raised Catholic, and I no longer necessarily consider myself Catholic or not even Christian per se, but I do definitely still believe in the teachings of Jesus. I believe he probably was a prophet, an actual historical figure who was trying to help society understand things that maybe we just weren't ready for. So, having said that, I don't want anyone to feel like this is a religious discussion per se. It is more just a discussion of this historical figure. First of all, I do feel that Jesus was probably a tender heart, somebody who's very compassionate, cares for everybody, perhaps a little over-emotional at times. All of that, I think you can definitely kind of see. My concern is that growing up, I was taught Jesus is a role model. Try to be like Jesus. Be the most like Jesus you can. And I'm not knocking that. I think for most people, the idea of striving to be as Jesus-like as possible is a good thing. Basically, strive to be as tender-hearted as you can. But here's the problem. For a tender heart, and especially one who may be a little autistic, who tends to take everything a little bit too literally, there's a question about whether or not Jesus is a very good role model. Because, yes, he believed in compassion and caring for everyone. He also struggled a bit with boundaries, right? If someone needed him, he was there for them. He would help the sick, the poor. He'd heal the lepers. He would do all these things. And people would come, and he would not stop until he had helped everyone he could. Which is very admirable, but also there's a question of, okay, looking back from the lens of 2025, I don't know if he had good boundaries. I don't know if he was doing good self-care when he was so worried about taking care of everybody else. And there's a question like, who was there for him? Perhaps his disciples were there, but I often get the feeling that he was the one caring for everyone else and nobody was caring for him. Which, again, admirable, beautiful trait for a prophet. But when you are trying to be like Jesus, some of the messages you can get is put everybody else first. Take care of everyone else's needs. Don't worry about your own. Don't set those boundaries. So in that sense, I started thinking about maybe he wasn't the person I should try to idolize and be like, because some of the issues that I've had in my life have been because of that, because I've been putting everyone else above myself, because I'm so compassionate and caring about others. I want to take care of them. Again, a wonderful trait and something I can understand why we want to strive towards, but there wasn't that limit of, but also take care of yourself. I think part of the reason for that is that for most people, that innate feeling of I have to take care of myself first kind of comes up. Whereas with a tender heart, we don't always think that way. We think, oh, let me take care of everyone else. My needs don't matter. And that's the part where I kind of am concerned about him as a role model. And then, of course, we get to the ultimate sacrifice that he pays, which is he gives his life for our sins, is what we keep hearing. Except if you're telling your tender heart, try to be more like Jesus, what part of that should you do and what part shouldn't you? Should I go ahead and sacrifice myself for others and let myself be hung up on a cross to try to help others instead of myself? Where do you draw that line? And again, I think for many people, that's obvious line. I'm not going to do that. I can help people in a crisis, but I'm not going to sacrifice myself for others. But again, it gets a little murky, and you're talking about a tender heart, especially one who's been told all their life, try to be like Jesus, emulate what he did. But on a last note about Jesus as a tender heart is to remember, if you are trying to follow in Jesus's shoes, the reason he ended up on the cross was not because he was kind and took care of people. It was because he spoke up. He spoke for his truth. And he tried to explain things to people that didn't understand and didn't want to. And he was ahead of his time. So If you look to this historical figure as a role model, remember, obviously, kindness to others, turning the cheek, forgiving your neighbors, all of that's important. But I think more important, especially for the tender hearts, is to remember it's not just about letting people walk all over you. It's about a conscious choice to help others and to speak out for what you believe, what you know is right, even in the face of opposition, in the face of oppression. I don't think you should sacrifice yourself, your life, whether it's your physical life or your emotional life, for others. But I think it is important to kind of stay true to what you believe in, even in a world that may not see things the way you do. So I guess in the long run, my point is there are definitely qualities in this person that are worth emulating, but also kind of be careful that you don't feel so much like, I need to be like Jesus, where you let everybody just take advantage of you and walk all over you, without remembering the most important thing about his life here on earth was to share what he saw, what he realized was possible, and being patient with those who couldn't see the vision that he had in his head. So if you are a tender heart and you want to emulate him, remember that as well. Remember the real point to follow in his example is to lead from the heart, lead from what you believe in, and don't give up those ideals for anyone. No matter how they treat you, you stay true to what you believe in. That was just some thoughts on that. I just thought I'd share. Hopefully nobody's offended by this. I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just looking at him as a person, what we can learn from him, both the positive and maybe the negative, and how we can use that to make our lives the best it can be. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.